Hi, this is Greg Kilstrom. Welcome to Season 3 of the Agile World, where we discuss customer and employee experience, organizational and workforce transformation, and how business can adapt and continually improve in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed in this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles, or get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kilstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. When is the right time to start or buy a business? Today we're going to talk about entrepreneurship in the midst of a global pandemic. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Domenic Rinaldi, Managing Partner at Sun Acquisitions. First, Domenic, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do at Sun Acquisitions?
Sure. Hey, Greg, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. So, Sun Acquisitions, we're a 20-year-old firm and we specialize in helping entrepreneurs buy and sell businesses. We focus on privately held companies, largely companies that have values of $50 million and under.
Great. Well, so let's get started here. While many have lost their jobs during this global pandemic, and businesses have been shuttered, many other signs in the business world are not great. There's still a lot of activity, as I think we can all see. So this includes entrepreneurship, M&A activity, IPOs, and more. From your perspective, what's the opportunity for entrepreneurship in the midst of a situation like this?
I think there is going to be tremendous opportunities. And you could look back over history, and most recently at the Great Recession in 2008. And I think would be a lot of people who probably started in entrepreneurship back then who would, come on your show and talk about what great timing that was for them to either, buy or start a business. And I see this as, a tremendous opportunity if you're in the right position, both from a cash perspective and, you're psychologically ready for the challenges that business ownership and entrepreneurship have. I think this is a great opportunity.
So, why would someone buy a company versus start one from scratch?
I think unless you are looking to build a side hustle or you're okay working something for a long time and incubating it to see if there's, any going to be any traction, I believe that buying is a much safer bet with any investment that you're going to make. And I say that for a number of reasons. When you think about buying an existing business versus starting one from scratch, when you buy one, you get ongoing revenues, hopefully ongoing profits, trained employees, uh, product or services that are tried and true, clients, vendor relationships, maybe banking relationships that you can take over, processes and systems. So you have all of these things. And I'll tell you, I guarantee you, any business that you look to buy, there are going to be warts. It's not going to be perfect. But if there's a solid foundation there that you can bring your skill sets and your experiences and your talents to maybe take to the next level, you're not having to start from scratch. You're not having to figure out if clients are going to like what you've built, if anybody's going to follow you. If you can, get employees to come on board, you could spend months, years trying to gain traction. In the meanwhile, burning through whatever capital you set aside to do this, and you're not pulling in any revenue or cash flows to support that. So I think, and when you look at the mortality rate of startups, it's a little over 50% that fail inside of 3 years. And if you take that out to 5 years, it's the vast majority of startups that fail. So versus buying an existing business that's been around and has a track record, your odds that that business is gonna survive are pretty good.
when someone is acquiring, what should people take a look? What should they look out for when they're considering an acquisition?
So, whether you're an individual entrepreneur or a small investor group making your first acquisition, or you're somebody who owns a company and you want to grow through acquisition, I always tell people that you need to really prepare. In my several decades of helping people buy and sell businesses, and I've been involved in over 300 M&A transactions. The big thing that I see time and time again is people fail to properly prepare. And what does that mean for somebody looking to buy? Well, it starts with, what are you trying to achieve? So many people will come to us and they know they want to buy a business in a certain geography, and they know they want a business that generates X amount of revenues and cash flows, and they tell us that they're agnostic to what sort of industry it's in, but that doesn't contemplate the fact that you may have to go and find lending for that acquisition, and a bank is going to look at your background and try to understand why they should lend you money against that acquisition. If you don't have experience and it doesn't make sense, the bank's not going to lend you money. So there's so much that goes into preparing for an acquisition beyond geography and what the cash flows might be, like lining up financing, really getting crystal clear on the types of businesses where you could leverage your background experiences and take to another level. Understanding how you're going to conduct due diligence, how you would get integrated into a new business, lining up professional advisors. And I really recommend, if this is your first time, or even if you've only done it a couple of times, surrounding yourself with smart advisors who specialize in M&A transactions. And that's everything from an M&A attorney, an M&A accountant, someone like myself, a firm that specializes in M&A transactions, whatever other consultants that you may need, insurance people. And you really need folks who understand M&A so they can guide you and keep you away from the many, many pitfalls that are, apparent in and maybe not apparent in a transaction.
Are there certain types of companies that you would recommend looking into, just based on what's going on right now, and maybe your thoughts on the next few months out?
Yeah, that's a really hard question to answer. And I always
Yeah,
start by answering that question with, you have to focus on businesses that A, are a good fit for your skills and talents, and B, that you're going to be passionate about and excited about running. And so, independent of what's hot right now, if it doesn't fit your background and your skill set, it doesn't do you any good. So you have to start with taking an inventory of yourself and where you think you can move the needle. Now, that aside, there are clearly right now some winners and some losers in the economy, right? I mean, you
yeah,
look at tech, you look at digital marketing, you look at IT, you look at healthcare. Sectors like that are uh, smoking hot.
yeah, yeah,
Retail is obviously, I mean, that's been in decline. Some sectors in manufacturing are really tough, while others are actually are seeing a rebound. So, there are some really great sectors to be focused on. But again, if you don't have the background and experience, or your skill set isn't transferable and you can't move the needle, I wouldn't spend a minute thinking about it. What I do is I brainstorm with a bunch of advisors to see, what sectors, are possible for you to look at, and start there, and then start doing your homework to hone in on a couple that you think, would really be exciting for you.
I like the way you put it. I mean, whether it's hot or not, it's got to be something that you can really put your heart and soul into as well. So I like that. Seasoned entrepreneurs have overcome a lot of the unknowns and anxieties associated with starting a company or acquiring one for the first time. But with a new set of entrepreneurs, there's sure to be a lot of people out there looking for good information. Where would you suggest that that these people start looking when they're evaluating businesses? And I think you've already given some great advice, but what are some resources that could help new potential entrepreneurs?
Well, obviously, the internet is a tremendous source, right? Googling, industry trends. So, if you hone in on an industry, really important to understand what's happening in that industry from many angles. What's the competition look like? What are the future prospects for that industry? What's happening with margins in that industry? Labor. How easy is it to get labor? So there are some sectors out there right now, you literally, our clients cannot find a good labor force, and it is one of the biggest challenges to growing their business. And so they're actually acquiring other businesses for the sole purpose of being able to acquire good capital, human capital resources. Trades are a great example. Companies, like heating and ventilation companies, plumbing, things like that. Very difficult to find people who want to enter those professions, and so those companies almost have a governor on growth because they can't find good workforce. So, really doing your industry resource from many different angles to figure out what's going on. And you can go beyond the internet and try to get your hands on some research reports. There are a number of companies out there that sell research reports, or libraries are a tremendous resource for free information. Many libraries actually give you access to research platforms for free as part of your library application. So, it's just tons of ways to get research. And then professionals, obviously, accountants and attorneys, speaking to people in that industry. I always think that talking to folks who are operating in a specific industry to get their unvarnished opinion about what's going on is a great way, uh, to get ahead of the curve. So you really, it's rolling up your sleeves and really diving in and trying to figure out what's going on. And then once you're comfortable with an industry, you then have a lot more research to do, right? Who are the companies? Are there good targets? People who want to potentially sell their businesses, and then how would you go about analyzing those businesses? And that's a whole, you're going to need completely different resources for all of that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you've helped a lot of companies and a lot of individuals in M&A activity and things like that. What do you I guess what's a common theme of questions or things that would be helpful, when someone comes to you and is interested, what would be helpful for them to have kind of thought through a little bit before they would start working with you?
So clearly, what their acquisition criteria is very important. Really understand what you're trying to acquire. You need to also understand your risk um, tolerances,
Mm, yeah.
because small business, we're talking about businesses with annual sales and enterprise values largely under 50 million. So that's small business.
Yeah.
What's your risk tolerance to own and operate a business like that? How much of your own capital are you willing to really risk in an investment to acquire a business? So you may be sitting on $1 million, but you may not want to, risk that entire amount. So how much of it are you willing to risk? Um, Understanding what your debt capabilities are. So banks are going to look at a buyer and try to understand what their global. There's a term called global cash requirements are, and so they're going to look at that. And based on their analysis of you, they're going to figure out how much they're really willing to lend you at the end of the day. Now, what's important in that is they need to understand the target company and the cash flows and revenues of that target company and so on and so forth. But banks can still look at you isolated and say, okay, we think you're capable of borrowing X amount of money. They'll even go as far as give you some industries that they think are a good fit based on your background. So understanding that is really important, because the last thing you want to do, unless you want to raise money from other people, and that's a whole different kettle of fish, taking on
Yeah.
partners and
Yeah.
raising money. Um, but the last thing you want to do is be out in the marketplace, looking for $20 million businesses when you really can only afford $2 million businesses.
Yeah. Yeah.
So understanding that is really important. And then some of the other things that I mentioned earlier, having the right team in place so you can act quickly, because right now the M&A market is incredibly active. There are so many buyers chasing fewer deals because there are fewer healthier companies. So unless you do this work up front, uh, you you're going to maybe lose out on opportunities. In fact, I spoke to a friend today, um, who was chasing an opportunity, and there were multiple bids. He was the fourth bidder on that business, and he was a little slow, and he lost out on that business. And that is not uncommon right now. Many of our good businesses are getting multiple offers. So you want to have your house in order and be ready to act quickly when you do see the right opportunity. And I'll tell you, Greg, that's one of the reasons we started our sister company earlier this year, Sun Acquisitions, which is purely an M&A firm. We help people buy and sell when they're ready to buy and sell. But we started K2 Advisor earlier this year, and the purpose of that company is to help buyers and business owners prepare for an acquisition or a sale. And so that, when they do get to the point where they're, out in the marketplace, either buying or selling, they know that they're ready. They've got the confidence that they're going to maximize their return and minimize their risks.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I mean that was one of the things I was gonna ask you as well. Is just what are the ways that you work with companies? I know you talked a little bit at the very beginning, but it of the challenges that someone runs into, and sort of the stages of the process. Where are the areas where you and your companies, it sounds like there's there's more than one, are able to help.
So let me just say that the pitfalls exist throughout the process. It's incredible.
Yeah.
I've never done a deal that, in all my years of doing it, and I've been personally involved in over 300. I've never done a deal that has gone smoothly from beginning to end. They just don't exist.
Yeah.
It just happens, right? And so the pitfalls are everywhere. And so on the M&A side, when you're ready to buy and sell, we're very high touch. We're there every step of the way with you. We're there to prevent you falling into those pitfalls, or when you do, help you get out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's very high touch. On the K2 advisor side, we do coaching, and so we try to educate people about each of the phases and what's likely to happen, and how they can secure the best outcome. But honestly, even with that, um, there are so many nuances to M&A transactions. You need to know that you've got a good team around you, because even the best coaching, you can't cover everything, because there's just so many variables when you
Yeah.
do a transaction. But
Mm.
I think, to put a bow on it, we try to educate people as much as we can, so that their eyes wide open. And the biggest advice we tell people is there's no perfect deal. You're going to hit speed bumps all along the way. Have a good team around you, and then you'll have the confidence and the peace of mind that you're doing a good transaction.
Yeah.
And
No,
by the
that's
way, a good advisor is somebody that's willing to tell you to walk away from a deal. I just told a client this last night. They were looking at a deal. They own a company, and they wanted to do a vertical integration. I looked at the financials of the target company, and I put them through a questionnaire, and it just wasn't making any sense, especially what what the target company was asking for the purchase price. And my advice to the client was, I just think you need to walk away from this deal. It's not right unless they're willing to be completely open minded about value. And he went back, and sure enough, they were not, and he's walking away from the deal.
Yeah, no, that's great to mention as well, because yeah, I mean, I think that consistent, I mean, first of all, I think the consistent presence throughout the process is really important. So there's, so that someone gets not just quick bites of information or anything like that, but guidance throughout the process. But also, yeah, I've been through that as well, where I've had some deals that looked really really good, for the first couple weeks, and then the more you dive into it, it's as much as you want to make it work, or maybe you have a vision of how it might work. Ideally speaking, it just the numbers don't add up. So that's, I mean, it's great to hear that.
Exactly.
Well, Domenic, thanks so much for joining. This has been a great conversation. For those listening to the show, what's the best way for them to learn more about what you're doing and keep up with you?
Yeah, I think the best way to learn about anything related to buying, selling a business is visit our website, sun acquisitions.com, or K2 Advisor. That's K the number 2 ADVISER.com. Tons of free resources, by the way, on both of those websites, ebooks and assessments, and our podcast, M&A Unplugged, which is available on all of the major platforms, or you can access all the episodes on our K2 Advisor website as well.
Wonderful. Well, again, I'd like to thank Domenic Rinaldi, managing partner at Sun Acquisitions, for joining the show. Thanks for listening to the Agile World with Greg Kilstrom. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. I'm your host, Greg Kilstrom. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Agile Workforce, from my website at theagile.world.